sheriff is important to the citizens of LaPorte because the level of authority the sheriff's position holds, their unique ability to protect the rights of the citizens, and the many capacities in which they serve to safeguard the county. We are honored to have the three candidates for LaPorte County Sheriff joining us tonight. Democrat Al Ott, Republican John Boyd, Libertarian Steve Osborne. Each candidate brings their own experience and background to share with us today. Our goal is to better understand how these candidates will uphold the values of LaPorte County patriots: freedom, constitutional rights, fiscal responsibility, and government transparency. During tonight's debate, candidates will have the opportunity to tell you a little bit about themselves. After that, we will ask the candidates questions of importance to the patriots and the citizens of LaPorte County. The same questions will be presented to all three candidates, and each will have 3 minutes to answer. At the end of the questions, each candidate will be allowed 1 minute rebuttal if they choose so. We ask for your participation as an audience. And at the end of the Patriots questionings, audience questions to the candidates are welcome and encouraged. Tonight's debate will be moderated by Ron Miller.
Thank you very much and good evening. We have a lot of questions and there are a lot of you here, so we're going to get started. We're going to start by introducing the three candidates. We'll give each candidate 3 minutes to introduce themselves. And I didn't ask, do we have someone who's going to do timing?
Yes.
Okay. Good. Why don't we start at the far end? We'll start with John Boyd. He is the Republican candidate for LaPorte County Sheriff. There's a microphone in front of you, John.
Good evening. Thank you for coming tonight and taking such interest in your sheriff's office. I'm honored to be here tonight with you and to be able to have an opportunity to introduce you and help you learn a little bit about the candidates and the LaPorte County Sheriff's Office. This is a very important election. We have so many issues here in LaPorte County, and I'm very eager to get to work and start addressing those issues. I'm very pleased tonight to have with me a great support network, and I have to introduce my wife, Amy, and my children, Megan and Nicholas. They're here with us tonight. Thank you for coming. I'm a lifelong resident of LaPorte County. I'm very fortunate. I'm going down a career path and seeking a goal that I've had for my entire life. When I was in 4th grade at Kingsborough Elementary School, my 4th grade teacher's husband, Larry Trueblood, and I'm honored that Larry is with us tonight in the audience, he influenced me more than probably any single person in my life other than my father. And at that age, in 4th grade, I knew that not only did I want to be a police officer, but I wanted to work for the LaPorte County Sheriff's Office, and I wanted to be sheriff someday. And that's when I began my journey. So I've been preparing myself my entire life, my entire professional career. I'm a graduate of LaPorte High School. I'm a graduate of Purdue University with a degree in criminal justice. In 1988, when I returned from Purdue University, I was hired by the LaPorte Police Department, where I served for 2 years. After 2 years, a position opened up at the LaPorte County Sheriff's Office, and my goals started to fall in place at that moment, and I was hired by then Sheriff Ken Layton as a patrolman with the LaPorte County Sheriff's Office. I've served as a deputy. I instituted the DARE program and the GREAT program in our LaPorte County schools. I served 17 schools in LaPorte County and western St. Joseph County. I've been a squad sergeant, I've been a detective sergeant, I've been a captain and chief of detectives, and currently my rank is major, where I'm third in command at the LaPorte County Sheriff's Office. In my position as major at the Sheriff's Office, I supervise and command all of our employees, approximately 170, and 10 or 12 part-time employees, and I also helped oversee our $8.4 million budget. I've got extensive leadership training, I've got extensive leadership experience, and I have command experience that dates back 14 years. I'm very close to my goal coming to fruition. I'm very honored to be here right now, and I consider myself so lucky because I have a job that I truly love, that I'm very passionate about. I know so many people that are in occupations that they don't look forward to going to work, they hate their job. Well, that's not me. I love my job so much that I'm frequently the first of our administrative staff to arrive in the morning, and I'm the last to leave at the end of the day. I don't make any overtime, and I frequently work 10, 12-hour days, sometimes 14, 16-hour days. And I do it because of the love of my job, and that's the same love that I will bring and enthusiasm and passion to the office of sheriff if I'm fortunate enough to be elected sheriff of LaPorte County. I thank you for coming here tonight and taking such an active interest in your sheriff's office. Thank you.
Our next candidate is Libertarian Steve Osborne.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Steve Osborne. I'm a very long-time resident of LaPorte County, although I did spend about 10 years away for a little while for work purposes. Had an opportunity to live in the Chicago area and also the Dallas-Fort Worth, gaining a lot of experience in management in the wireless industry on the technical side, technical operations, which included equipment and manpower and systems, critical systems that needed to keep working at all times. And I would emphasize that the sheriff's position is really an administrative position. And I have a lot of administrative experience managing men and equipment in multiple states at the same time and in multiple transmitting systems to keep hospitals and other emergency services going. And I've had a lot of accomplishments and have worked well and honorably in every position that I've held since I worked at the Sheriff's Department, which I did for 5 years. In my very young adult years, I spent 5 years as a dispatcher. In those days, there was not a 911 center when the dispatchers were actually members of the Sheriff's Department. And I can't tell you what a gratifying experience that was to work with those men and women and to work in that very needed service that is provided in our county. I also am married, have been married for 38 years, have 5 children, 6 grandsons that are kind of spread out in various areas around the state and nearby state. I am particularly running as a libertarian and on a liberty platform because of the things that we've been seeing in the militarization of our police departments across the nation. We have been seeing a lot of it in the news and the alternate news. If you like reading alternate news on the internet, you've probably been aware of these things for a number of years. It's been building a lot. But it hasn't been until recently with all the recent troubles in Ferguson that it's really started coming out in the mainstream media, CNN, it doesn't matter whether you want to call it a progressive or a Democrat news source or Republican, conservative, Glenn Beck. They're all talking about it, and it's like they're almost surprised at how far it's gotten in such a short amount of time, but it's actually been going on for some time. So I'm hoping that we get an opportunity to talk about that a little bit tonight, and I am very experienced and honorable in all the work that I've done in every place that I've worked. And I ask for your support, and I thank you for being here tonight, and to the LaPorte County Patriots.
Our next candidate is the Democratic candidate for LaPorte County Sheriff, Al Ott.
Thank you, Ron, and excuse me, and thank you to the LaPorte Patriots for putting on this event. It's a good event for the public to come out, to hear what the candidates have to say, and educate themselves for their vote. So for that, thank you for that. For those of you that don't know, my name is Al Ott, and I am the Democratic candidate for the sheriff's race here in the fall election. Caught a cold back in about a week and a half ago walking in a parade, so my voice is coming back slowly. At any rate, excuse me. I started my career at the sheriff's office in 1994. I'm 42 years old, and I will be completing my 20th year with the department at the end of the year. I've been married to my wife Jamie for 17 years, and we have 2 daughters, Riley and Ryan. That's not what I'm very, without them, I couldn't be doing all the things that we do in this campaign. Great support staff. My mother and my father are here as well. I've got a extensive law enforcement family that, again, have been very supportive. During my career, I've worked in multiple areas. I worked in the jail division where I started, and I worked there for 3 years. And then I worked in patrol division. I worked 11 years in the detective bureau, where I handled all major felony investigations, A, B, C, D felonies, to include homicide cases, several of those. Very proud of being able to do that. It was a great experience, a great challenge. And currently I'm a sergeant supervising on the midnight patrol shift. During this entire campaign, I've talked about returning to civility. And that's so important to me. That's basically, in a nutshell, what people have asked. That means treating people like people, as law enforcement officers, as citizens of the community. I intend to rebuild the lines of communication within our own department first, then with outside police agencies and social service agencies, to include at the state and federal levels. Also with local law enforcement officials, we need to do a better job there. And then finally, you, the public, the lines of communication with the public. I think we need to really grasp what the public wants and expects and deserves. So that's some of my main issues that I have talked about during my campaign. We need a sheriff that can connect with the people in order to get this task done. Thank you.
First part of our presentation tonight, the LaPorte County Patriots prepared a number of questions, and we're going to present them to each of the three candidates. We'll do it on a rotating basis. The candidate will have 3 minutes to answer, and after all three candidates have answered, then if the candidates want to 1 minute rebuttal, they will have time for that as well. So we have a lot of questions to get to, and we're going to start with Steve Osborne. If any of the candidates want me to repeat the question, because after 3 minutes, this one is a two-part, for example, you may need to catch up. We'll be glad to do that. Steve, the first question. History of publicly elected officials has shown from time to time the abuse of public funds, from missing money to the purchases of unneeded equipment. What will you do to curb the abuse of spending and internal theft? The second part of the question, what experience do you have managing a large budget, and how will this help you in dealing with the finances of the Sheriff's Department?
Well, the first part, micromanaging is very difficult to do. However, there's a lot of resources. A good manager knows where to go for his resources. And there are people I know that are still on the department that work in areas where they keep track of all this stuff. There's a lot of spreadsheets available. And the libertarians, some of the libertarians recently have been looking at the credit card statements of employees in the county, and it is a mess. And there are people who have credit cards that apparently they shouldn't have, and the expenses are really getting out of hand. So micromanaging from the standpoint of looking over these summaries and finding out where stuff is going is a big part of this job. It isn't out there chasing the criminals, which I'm glad to do if they need me. However, if they need me to do that, then the department's in worse shape than these two guys have been letting us know. So shame on them for not letting us. But I don't think things are that bad. I'm more than willing to help out in any way that I can. But in the management aspect, we have a lot of resources to draw on. A manager doesn't always have to know how to do everything himself, but he has to know where he can go to get the answer. Now, on the second part of the question about my experience, I worked for a company where I managed technicians and systems in about 11 states. The technical staff wasn't quite that large, but we had contractors who were also under my wing to ensure that these systems were working. And we would sit down and do budgeting. We had capital expenditure committee meetings that I was a part of every month, and we carefully tracked the expenses and the projects and the costs of these things, and very carefully stayed within the budgets, or if we had to make, something that was a little bit unexpected, we did things best we could with what we had, or we also made a good presentation. That's part of it. This is your police department. This is your protection. And it's not like in a business where you have the bottom line that you can see how well you're doing. It's how well you're protected and what kind of services we need to provide to you. And that is going to remain or improve under an Osborne administration. And I'm glad to answer any questions considering this afterwards. But I do have a lot of experience in management of these things and have performed honorably. I also might mention that I've been an honorable person all my life, and I have always paid my taxes, and we'll leave that for another time. Thanks.
How do you get the question repeated? Sure. History of publicly elected officials has shown from time to time the abuse of public funds, from missing money to the purchases of unneeded equipment. What will you be doing to curb the abuse of spending and internal theft? The second part of the question, what experience do you have managing a large budget, and how will that help you in dealing with the finances of the Sheriff's Department?
Well, the answer to the first question would be very simple. We're going to be accountable. I actually talk about that, the accountability, accessibility, and approachability, but the accountability would fit in that category. Everyone that's going to be working, myself included, probably at the first and foremost, be a leader in your words and words and actions will match. So we're going to be accountable. If there is somebody that's going to be, for lack of terms, doing improper things or unethical things, they'll be held accountable to that. If it means that we have to, those people get disciplined or fired or whatever, we'll do what we need to do. But again, it's the tax dollars, your tax dollars, my tax dollars, all of our tax dollars that are going to be being abused, and that's not what it's intended for. As an elected official, we have a higher standard as well. So, and the second question in regards to managing large amount of money. I'm a policeman. I was raised by a policeman. I've never made ungodly amounts of money. I'm a proud LaPorte County blue-collar worker. I work every day. I manage my money, and I think that's what we really want to think about. Managing money is probably the most important thing. I don't think we teach that to our young children. I try to teach that to my kids. Managing money, the principles that guide that, how you spend your money, is what's more important than how much we're spending, or how much we make, excuse me. So, in that regards, managing an 8.4, give or take a couple $100,000, which sounds kind of funny to say, but an $8.4 million budget, it's the guiding principles of how you manage the money is, I think, what's more important. And I know I've done that a very good job in my own personal life. Jamie and I, we've raised two beautiful girls, and they're well clothed, we're well fed, we're healthy, and we pay our bills, just as I pay my taxes as well. And they come around quicker sometimes than what we need, but we do pay them, and that's part of our responsibility. So that's my experience with handling money. Thank you.
John, do you need the question repeated?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It's actually an excellent question, and this is something that I do every day. It's part of my responsibility. We do have an $8.4 million budget. That's something that I help to oversee. I have annual reviews that I go in front of with the Indiana State Board of Accounts, and to many in LaPorte County government, they quiver and shake when they hear that the Indiana State Board of Accounts is in town, in particular in LaPorte County government offices. I look forward to meeting with the State Board of Accounts, and I'm very proud of the fact that when I meet with the State Board of Accounts, they give me an exemplary review because of the meticulous record keeping that I do, that I always balance, and that I'm able to answer their questions without hesitation, show them where the money is, show them how we do what we do at the Sheriff's Office. This is something that I won't have to learn when elected because I have that experience. An $8.4 million budget is a lot of money. It's your money. And you need to trust somebody with experience with that type of money. I've got that experience. Yet we do need transparency. You have a right to know how we're spending your money. And that's one of the frustrations that I have at the Sheriff's Office, that to this point we haven't been transparent. I think we should have quarterly reviews with our review board, which is our county council that oversees how we spend money. We should utilize our liaison, our county council liaison, who is right now is Terry Garner, so he can see our books, so he can see exactly what we're doing and how we're spending their money, your money. It's very important that we report back to you and let you know what we're doing with the money that you provide us. You're our stakeholders, and we're not doing an adequate job of reporting back to you.
We have a lot of two-part questions tonight, so you might as well get used to that. We're going to start the next round of questions. 1 minute rebuttal. Do any of the three of you have anything additional you want to say, starting with Steve?
Well, let me just talk about honor for a minute. I don't know these two gentlemen real well, but I know them so far as to be honorable men, and I really like that. I'm glad I don't have the decision about who I'm going to vote for if I only had those two, because I couldn't make a choice. I know who I'm going to vote for. But I would like to say that, I don't even put a sign up for myself in my own yard,
Thanks.
But I said this last time we were together, I've never had a moving violation. I'm gonna drive away real careful. In 44 years of driving, I've never had a moving violation. On the Indiana tax form, I don't know, for the last 10 or 15 years or whatever it's been, where they've had on there, have you bought anything that you didn't pay sales tax on from, Amazon's now charging, but I filled that in. I don't know if the other candidates do, I don't know if you do, but I do. That's what a stickler I am for being sure that my finances are done honestly.
How would you like to vote? Okay, John? Okay. Next one again is a two-part question, or the next one after that, and I will start with you. The Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution is the part of the Bill of Rights that prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures and requires any warrant to be judicially sanctioned and supported by probable cause. The Supreme Court has justified the violation of our Fourth Amendment rights as long as you tell people when you're doing it. Do you feel the sobriety checkpoints actually do any good, and are they just a legalized Fourth Amendment violation? The second part of the question, if elected sheriff, would you continue these sobriety checkpoints?
Well, I myself have not worked ever one of those events. I have a small business that I have occupies my time on the other side, although now I've kind of stopped doing that, busy campaigning. Are they effective? I think they are effective. I do think they are effective. They, they're every night of the week right now. There's somebody that could be or potentially is driving impaired. And the intention is to curb that. I know they're well publicized. When you read them in the paper, they put them out there. And people know that they're out there. The fact that we're out there, and I think people need to understand that we just need to stop doing that type of activity. It's not safe for our children. It's not safe for me. It's not safe for any of us to be out on the road sober when we have other people out driving impaired. So yes, to the answer to that question in a nutshell is yes, they are effective. And you're going to have to repeat that second one for us.
Second part of the question, if elected sheriff, would you continue these sobriety checkpoints?
Yes, I would. I think they are an effective tool. Although, like I said, I've not worked them, but they are effective to keep people from just doing negligent things and keep our roads safe. So, yes, I would continue that.
John, would you like the question repeated? Okay.
Please.
First part of the question, the First Amendment to the United States Constitution is the part of the Bill of Rights that prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures and requires any warrant to be judicially sanctioned and supported by probable cause. The Supreme Court has justified the violation of our Fourth Amendment rights as long as you tell people when you're doing it. Do you feel the sobriety checkpoints are actually doing any good, or are they just a legalized Fourth Amendment violation? Second part of the question, if elected sheriff, would you continue the sobriety checkpoints?
That's a very good question. I was the DUI task force commander for all of LaPorte County for approximately 10 years, so I've got a lot of background when it comes to that and a lot of insight as well. The Supreme Court has laid out the parameters for the sobriety checkpoints, so who would know better their constitutionality than the Supreme Court itself? I do believe that they are constitutional as long as they're followed, the guidelines that the Supreme Court set forth are followed. However, with that being said, if elected sheriff and as former DUI task force commander, I think they're effective in one regard. They're effective in that they're a deterrent. They're not effective in removing impaired or intoxicated drivers from our roadways. And I know that because traditionally in LaPorte County, we utilize saturation patrols. Saturation patrols are areas that we identify where we have a high frequency of operating while intoxicated arrests, operating while intoxicated related crashes, and so we'll go and we'll saturate a particular area. Also places where there's a great likelihood for there to be drinking. If there's a festival where perhaps there's a concert or there's a beer garden, we would go and saturate that particular area. I know from doing statistical review, there's no better way of removing drunk drivers from the roadway than to saturate an area and remove the drunk drivers after we stop them from probable cause that we've established due to their driving behavior. I think from a deterrent standpoint, I know that when we put out word and we're required by the Supreme Court to announce that we're having sobriety checkpoints, that's a huge deterrent. However, when you look at the statistics and you compare how many arrests we make from a DUI checkpoint, we have very, very few. But when we have saturation patrols that go out, we have a great number of DUI arrests. Plus, I also think from a manpower standpoint and how much bang we get from our buck, when we set up a sobriety checkpoint, it's extremely labor intensive, therefore it's extremely expensive. We can put out a lot more officers using saturation patrols than if we were to use one single DUI checkpoint. So the answer to the question is absolutely not. I would not be in favor of it, and in fact I would talk to our prosecuting attorney as well. I just don't think it's a wise use of manpower, and I don't actually think that we're removing many, if any, drunk drivers.
Steve, would you like to repeat the question?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay.
Just so it's fresh in the mind of all of us. I think I know what I want to say, but let's...
Okay. The Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution is the part of the Bill of Rights that prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures and requires any warrant to be judicially sanctioned and supported by probable cause. The Supreme Court has justified the violation of our Fourth Amendment rights as long as you tell people when you're doing it. Do you feel the sobriety checkpoints are actually doing any good, or are they just a legalized Fourth Amendment violation? And the second part of the question, if elected sheriff, would you continue to employ sobriety checkpoints?
All right, first of all, remember I'm a libertarian. Okay, so when I give you my answer here, understand the philosophy of liberty that started this country. And the sobriety checkpoints, the only thing that I've been through once was a checkpoint where they were checking for the winterization of your car to see if you were all ready. And I was a member of the department at that time, and I remember I knew the state policeman that waved me over. And I remember I was a young man, so I wasn't as politically objectionable to such things as I am now. But I remember being greatly incensed inside that they would pull me over. I had somewhere to go, and it really upset me. And so I'm looking at the liberty angle of it, that it's just not right to just detain people. If you get detained in something like that, ask them if you're being detained. If you're not being detained, technically you have the right to leave. So that's something to remember when this happens. So that being said, and there's probably some other things on the Fourth Amendment that we'll get into a little bit later on. It's being quite abused here in recent years. And unless we start being aware of this and start asserting our control to change things, it's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse. So we're going to have to wake up a little bit and figure out how to put a stop to some of these things. This is just another way to let us see who's in control out there, who that we have to obey, and that's my opinion of it. Now, they will not occur if I'm sheriff, but we will pull you over and take you in if you are driving impaired. But I think that we'll find more being on the road, observing all traffic, or I like John's answer, being in a particular area, when there's an event or something going on. That is a good use of manpower and a good use of protection for us to keep these people off the road, to get them off the road. I've seen people out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon that are weaving all over the place, and we just can't have that. As too dangerous for all of us. It doesn't matter if you're a police officer in a squad car. I rode with a man once, one of the sheriff's deputies, being on the sheriff's department. We had the opportunity to go out and ride. We did a lot of things that the dispatchers today in the 911 center, they don't get to do. We were on midnights, and we were sitting at a red light, and at about 70, 80 miles an hour behind us comes this car that's just about going to hit us as we're waiting for the red light. He swerves at the last second, goes through the red light, and yes, he was smashed pretty good. So patrol, I think, is the best way to get those people off the roads.
Al, do you have a 1 minute rebuttal? John? Steve, anything more?
I do, yes. I'm a libertarian, so yes, I
have another minute.
Now I just ran across this today. I'm going to hold it up. I don't think you're going to be able to see it, but Indiana becomes a police state. Supreme Court overrules Fourth Amendment. Now I just ran across this today, so I haven't had much time to research it, but it was from 2011. The Indiana Supreme Court basically said that In a 3-2 decision, Justice Stephen David, writing for the court, said if a police officer wants to enter a home for any reason or no reason at all, the homeowner cannot do anything to block the officer's entry. So, that's correct. But now I don't know if that's gone to the U.S. Supreme Court or not, and something that I need to research a little bit more. I kind of disagree with John here a little bit. The U.S. Supreme Court basically asserted their right that they're the final answer. The Constitution does not give them that authority. Actually, the 10th Amendment gives us the authority to assert what's constitutional and what isn't.
Another two-part question. Stories of police using excessive force, being trigger-happy, quick to shoot the family animal, and using police resources to publicly embarrass people, as well as overuse of county vehicles for personal use, are some of the stories being told on social media. Give a brief explanation of what you plan to do to improve these conditions and public perception of the LaPorte County Police Department. How do you plan to work with the union to ensure that the officers accused of misconduct are handled appropriately?
Well, I think the answer to that question comes down to leadership. If you have strong leadership and you set out expectations for those that are under your span of control and in your command, those employees will fall into place. They'll know what is to be expected. You also set a standard just by the way you live your life, the way you have worked your career, and I think you should be a role model and a mentor for other officers as well. But certainly you need to set clear expectations for those that work within the department. I'm very fortunate that I've not seen those abuses of power that you were talking about here at the LaPorte County Sheriff's Office. There's always the question of people using their police cars off duty. And the county council makes it clear to us that that's part of our salary. And in fact, the sheriff and the council and the commission have always encouraged our officers to drive their cars off duty. Well, there are certain limitations to that, of course, because it's always an extra officer that's out there that's available to answer calls. In fact, I can think of many times during the course of my career, my nearest backup was 20 minutes away. And if it hadn't been for an officer in a take-home car, they came and actually bailed me out and was able to be my backup, my primary backup officer. I can think at times my phone is rung at 3:30 in the morning, and it's the dispatch center saying, we're really getting it handed to us right now. We have an alarm at 39 of the state line. I live in Heston. Can you respond because you live so close? And I hop in my take-home car and I respond to that call. So there is a give and a take when it comes to that. I think that when there is an allegation of an abuse of power, it needs to be immediately investigated. It needs to be investigated by the administration, and if it looks like it could be something criminal in nature, it immediately needs to be handed over to an independent agency, say for instance the Indiana State Police, so they can make an unbiased opinion and do an unbiased investigation, see if it's worthy of criminal charges. Sometimes it may just be someone getting a little overboard, but our officers are in harm's way each and every day. And with the advent of social media and handheld cameras, oftentimes what we see on YouTube or on Facebook or Twitter is just a little snippet of what really happened. And so I think you need to have the totality of the circumstances. And I don't think we should use social media as a barometer as to how we're doing our job. What should be the barometer of how we're doing our job is to get out in the community and get out in the individual communities and find out from them how the public thinks that we're doing our job and what suggestions that they may have.
Steve, the question, two-part question. Stories of police using excessive force, being trigger-happy, quick to shoot the family animal, and using police resources to publicly embarrass people, as well as overuse of county vehicles for personal use, are some of the stories being told on social media. Give a brief explanation of what you plan to do to improve these conditions and public perception of the LaPorte County Sheriff's Department. Second part, how do you plan to work with the union to ensure the officers accused of misconduct are handled appropriately?
Well, the social media part, yes, we shouldn't depend on social media, but it does have its place. It can flag us. I had an interview once for a job, and I'll never forget what this interviewer asked me. He said, "What do you think the mark of a good technician is?" I've been a radio frequency technician most of my life. And he wanted to know what the mark of a good technician was. Well, I can't tell you what my answer was. I've long forgotten that. But he said what he thought was the mark of a good technician is someone who could recognize that there was a problem. People don't complain for nothing. These things aren't on the social networks for nothing. There's something to them. We may not have the whole story, and I agree with that, but here's a report that if you have any interest at all, you should take a look at it. It's done by the ACLU, and I know I'm not a big fan of the ACLU either, but they do try to defend the Bill of Rights. And this is some research that they did. They sent out questionnaires to about 200 and some police departments. Only about 100 and some responded, but they wanted to know the uses of the equipment and the special weapons and tactics that were going on. And this is full of horror stories of not just dogs getting shot, but people. There's one in here of a SWAT team that went to arrest, had a warrant for a person. They found him in the front yard of the house. They didn't have a warrant for anything else, but if they could find him in the house, they were to go in the house. They decided to go in the house anyway. The old grandfather that was in there followed all their instructions, laid on the floor, put his hands above his head, and accidentally got shot by one of the M15s or AR-15s that the officer was carrying, and was killed. And that story repeats all across the nation. And it's really coming to light here now with a lot of these things. So we need to get a grip on some of these things. Now, I'm sorry, the
Second part of the question, how do you plan to work with the union to ensure that the officers accused of misconduct are handled appropriately?
well, I'm hoping, first of all, that we don't get to that point, that we have them trained enough that, yes, they have these military instincts. They're coming out now with this training that they're warriors. And we end up being the enemy in those things. So we have to try and constrain them a little bit so that we don't get to that. But I have worked with unions before, not a lot, minimally, but I sympathize with their positions as well and the dangers that these guys face on the road every day and even at home.
If you could. Sure. Stories of police using excessive force, being trigger happy, quick to shoot the family animal, and using police resources to publicly embarrass people, as well as the overuse of county vehicles for personal use, are some of the stories being told on social media. Give a brief explanation of what you plan to do to improve these conditions and public perception of the LaPorte County Sheriff's Department. Second part, how do you plan to work with the union to ensure that the officers accused of misconduct are handled appropriately?
The people in here that know who I am, I'm not a big fan of the social media world. I don't have a Facebook account. I wouldn't know how to get on it. I don't do Twitter. I don't have an email. I pride myself with personal contact with people. That holds a person accountable just by that. A handshake can go a long way. So the social media, I'm not totally against it. It doesn't work for me in my life. It's proven to me day in, day out by talking with people, I mean not you, but people in the public that tell me how much drama is involved with it. And as an official that works for all of the public, we need, again, I've said this earlier, we need to be accountable to you, and we need to be held at a higher standard. So with all that put in place, I'm not a big fan of it. I realize I live in 2014, and it's here to stay. It's a great tool if you want to communicate with friends in Arizona and things of that nature, but it just seems like we abuse that, everything that's good in the world these days. It's an unfortunate thing, but nonetheless, it is occurring. So as far as some of the other things that were referred to, I think it was quick shooting or quick, I'm not sure of the verbiage
Quick
there.
to shoot the family animal, using police resources to publicly embarrass people, and the overuse of county vehicles for personal use.
Just addressing the quick to shoot the animals. I'll agree with Major Boyd on that. I'm not aware of that occurring with our department. You hear of things in the news and in the media where law enforcement may have acted inappropriately or appropriately. Again, I'm not going to comment on whether right or wrong without not knowing, but I do know as a firearms instructor with the academy, we are held again to a higher standard. There's a use of force the force continuum that we are held to for every time that we would discharge our weapon. So speaking here and staying on focus for LaPorte County, because that's why we're here, I'm not familiar with it. I've never seen it in my 20 years. So, in that respect, I really don't, again, I'll agree with Major Boyd on that, so. Which is a tribute to the men and women that work for our department. We have professionals here and they're doing a good job, so. And the second part of it, I'm sorry?
How do you plan to work with the union to ensure that the officers accused of misconduct are handled appropriately?
Again, that's from the first question we had. It goes back to the accountability, holding ourselves to a better standard than the general public. We need to conduct ourselves appropriately and, again, hold ourselves accountable. Thank you.
It's not so much as a rebuttal, it's just a point of reference. The sheriff's office, we are not unionized, we don't have a union, so it's not that the sheriff has to work with the union when it comes to any disciplinary matters. He actually needs to work with his command staff and his supervisory staff, and also the merit commission as well. There are certain things that the sheriff can do by code as far as discipline is concerned, and there are other things than the merit commission, which is an independent board of civilians that make up the merit commission that would oversee hiring, firing, and any certain levels of discipline.
Stephen, I guess you'd like another 60 seconds?
Yes, and maybe a little longer with the permission of these guys, because I want to defend the take-home car program. I want to relate an experience that they probably don't know about, because they're too young. This is a failure, but it also shows you why we need this take-home car program. Many years ago, when I was a dispatcher back in about 1980, 81, we had 2 robberies up at the state line where you were just referring. It was Purple Martin gas station at that time. There was a murder occurred at each one. On the second one, that occurred 1 week later, we actually had a suspect we had information about where he was going, and we had to chase him, and we had to call out everybody. Unfortunately, there had been a death in the LaPorte City Police Department, and all the squad cars were getting washed by the trustees. Everybody had to race into the sheriff's department to get their cars. Now, this sounds like a failure. When we really needed it, it wasn't there, but it's a good demonstration of why that program is really necessary. It took all night and better to get that guy off the streets that committed 2 murders. And I get upset every time I hear this on Sound Off, somebody belly aching about the take-home car program.
Now you'd like another 60 seconds.
In regards to the take-home policy, there are pros and cons, as it's been brought up here. I choose to, I've got a business on the side. I have my own personal vehicle. My wife has her own personal vehicle. And so we choose to do that, drive our vehicles. As I see citizens here, and so you can appreciate having a vehicle where you don't have to fill that tank and fill that tank and fill that tank, and with the dollars that are or the gas prices are where they're at, it seems like the dollars just flow out of the pocket. So I understand that, and I can appreciate everything that you're doing, but we choose that. But the take-home policy does have some benefits, so we pretty much laid them out already. So I agree with that, but there are pros and cons. But I choose to try to be like the people here, because I'm just like you. Thank you.
Okay, Steve, we'll start with the next question, and surprise, surprise, a 2-part question. This one is a small book, so it's going to take a minute.
That's right up my line.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Supreme Court of the United States has ruled that the right vests in individuals, not merely collective militias, which also ruling that the right is not unlimited and does not prohibit all regulation of either firearms or similar devices. Many attempt to infringe on the Second Amendment have been attempted and are still being threatened today by the federal government. If by some strange chance of liberal lunacy their demanding succeeds, what side will you choose? The U.S. Constitution and a right to defend ourselves, or an unjust federal law? Second part of the question, after Hurricane Katrina, police went house to house disarming the citizens. This is a major concern for many citizens, removing the right to defend themselves at the time when they may need it most. In the event of a natural or man-made disaster, would the people of LaPorte County have to be concerned that they will be disarmed as the people of New Orleans were?
I'm going to say something here that may not be very fair to these two gentlemen. So as I start, you might have a tendency to nod your head. Don't do that. I'm just going to be fair here because it won't work out for you. I think these guys are good soldiers, and I really worry about that in incidents just like the question that's been asked. You know, are they going to be, like I heard in a movie once, a doggy on the dashboard? Yes, Department of Homeland Security. Yes, FBI. We're going to go out and we're going to get the guns. They're good soldiers. I don't know. Now, I will not have my department doing that. Now, there may be some repercussions from that. You're going to have to decide, do you want those repercussions? Or do you want a police department that's going to stand up for you and stand by that Constitution and let you keep your weapons? So that's something that each of you will have to decide. And you're going to have to decide how much of the Constitution you're willing to support. And by the way, I think that we all have an oath to support the Constitution. I had a chance to talk to a D.C. Circuit judge once after hearing him speak. This is, about one step below the Supreme Court. And I asked him, Bush was doing signing statements at the time, and I said, since a new citizen has to raise his hand and swear to uphold the Constitution, that inures to me as being born here. That's automatically my oath, is it not? Can't I then go and defend the Constitution and file a lawsuit against such things? And he real quick said no, because judges, make a quick decision like that. But then he just stared at me. He said, but that's interesting. So I think we all have an oath to defend the Constitution. Now, I've written a number of articles. If you go to my webpage, you'll see links to them. One of them I state, it's hard to defend the Constitution when there's a howitzer pointed at your house and they're asking for your guns. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know what I'm going to do as sheriff. I'm not coming to your house to get it, if that's the case. I can't speak to these guys. I hope they will say the same thing. But I also know they're good soldiers, so I don't know. I don't know where we're going to be at that. I'm sorry, the second part was?
Second part is, in the event of a natural or man-made disaster, would the people of LaPorte County have to be concerned if they will be disarmed as the people of New Orleans were?
All right, I'm going to tell you quickly an experience I had some years ago, not with this prosecutor's office, the outgoing one, but the one that was before that. In a libertarian meeting, I mentioned to him that there were some internet rumors that some people in northern Indiana had been told by the federal government that we needed to be ready for an influx of people from Chicago, and I asked him, what are we going to do if that happens? And he said, we're on our own. So, Second Amendment.
I'm going to shorten this, Al, but I'll read it again. Many attempts to infringe on the Second Amendment have been attempted and are still being threatened today by the federal government. If by some chance the change that they are demanding succeeds, what side will you choose? The U.S. Constitution and our right to defend ourselves, or an unjust federal law? The second part, in the event of a natural or man-made disaster, would the people of LaPorte County have to be concerned if they will be disarmed as the people of New Orleans were?
Well, I am a proud U.S. citizen. I'm a proud state of Indiana citizen. I took an oath 18 years ago to obey or to enforce laws. As sheriff, I will continue that. And I will obviously want my men and women working each day to continue that as well. I firmly believe anybody that goes into an office, a sheriff, a county councilman, state legislators, they go into office to do the right thing. I don't know if that is really truly the case, but in my mind, that's what I believe they do. So, with that being said, if they so choose downstate, in this state of Indiana, to put that into a law, I will have to obey that, and I will have to enforce those laws. Now, in my 11 years in the Detective Bureau, I can tell you that there has been times when I have not agreed with the law. There were times, there's several policemen in here, retirees. I think they all probably would agree with me at certain times in their careers that we may not have agreed with the law. But it comes down to integrity. We take an oath. So when we take that oath, I feel that we need to enforce the laws. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
John, I'll give you the shortened version also. Many attempts to infringe on the Second Amendment have been attempted and are still being threatened today by the federal government. If by some strange chance the changes they are demanding succeeds, what side will you choose? The U.S. Constitution or our right to defend ourselves or an unjust federal law? The second part, in the event of a natural or man-made disaster, would the people of LaPorte County have to be concerned that they will be disarmed as the people of New Orleans were?
I took an oath when I became a police officer. I raised my right hand, and my oath was to defend the Constitution of the United States and defend the Constitution of the state of Indiana. And that's what I've done, and that's what I will continue to do. Part of my responsibility at the sheriff's office, 5 days a week, sometimes 6 if I work a little on the weekends, is to do our handgun permitting. I'm a very pro Second Amendment individual, and this is where it really is important. It comes into play, and I've got to make some decisions as to whether or not we grant a handgun permit to somebody. In the state of Indiana, there are rules and regulations concerning whether we permit someone for a handgun. Somebody's been convicted of a felony, they're a violent felon, we deny them, whether they apply or not. It's not their right any longer. They forfeited their right when they were convicted of a felony. Likewise, if somebody has been diagnosed by a mental health professional that they're unfit to be allowed to carry a handgun, we do not permit them. And that's a decision that I have to make, armed with information that's been presented to me. And that's not a job that I take lightly. That's a tough decision, because I always have to face the person who I just denied their handgun permit, and I have to explain to them why. But sometimes we have greater responsibility to the mass than we do the one individual who's applying. It's a tough decision that we have to make, yet that's a decision that I'm entrusted to make. I took an oath to defend and uphold the Constitution of the state of Indiana and the United States of America, not to support the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, or the FBI, or the Bureau of Land Management, or the IRS, some of the other organizations that, in my opinion, are out of control. Groups like the FBI and the ATF can be wonderful resources when we call upon them, and we need them. And they've been great partners for us here in LaPorte County. They've been able to give us technology and manpower and technology when we haven't been able to afford that on our own. We lack the expertise or the resources for that. I don't think that we have anything to worry about if we have another incident like we had in New Orleans. I don't think you're going to find us going door to door removing guns. And as sheriff, I certainly wouldn't be a party to that. I know as major at the sheriff's office, I wouldn't be a party to that. We have a lot more important issues to do than going door to door removing guns. I think that's kind of a scare tactic, and I think that just riles people up, and that's why there's some mistrust going on, because there's misinformation about what's going on in our country today. But again, I swear to uphold the Constitution, not the special interest groups or not certain elements within the federal government.
You have another 60 seconds.
I just want to reiterate that the Constitution of the United States is the ultimate law of the land. It's not anything else. It's the ultimate law of the land is the Constitution. And I read a story some few years ago that the federal government, some agencies of the federal government, were trying to get some of the larger congregations, preachers, to understand that when martial law came, not yet, but when martial law came, it would be up to them to help get the guns from the citizens. And that they should follow Romans 13 that says that you need to be honorable to the powers that be. The law of the land is the Constitution of the United States, not whoever it is that's knocking at our doors demanding that we do this. So yes, some of what these gentlemen have said are true. There are laws, but there is the ultimate law of the Constitution of the United States and our inalienable rights as well. We forget those.
Al, would you like to go 60 seconds?
Just real quick, in regards to the Second Amendment, we can get real long-worded with everything that we're going to talk about here. I am an NRA life member. I believe in the right to bear arms. Again, it goes back to the pride of being just a citizen in this great country. So I am an NRA life member. But with that being said, again, I talked about coming from a law enforcement family. weapons have always been, in my mind, used for personal protection and nothing more, really. Hunting for recreational, other than that, the lack of training when possessing a firearm is the real concern that I have, and people that are going to possess them. I don't know if we can control that, but it seems like something that we need to look at and look into.
John?
Al hit on an interesting point, and I do believe in the right to bear arms, because I have been witness in the last 16 months here in LaPorte County to 2 incidents where homeowners were able to successfully thwart a home invasion because they were armed. In one case, it ended up where the suspect was dead. It was because he broke into someone's home, he was armed with a deadly weapon, and the homeowner was able to stand his ground, and he was able to preserve his own life in that situation. So that's why I feel that it's so very important. I see what the St. Joseph County Sheriff's Department has done recently, our neighbors to the east, where they're providing training for people that are first-time firearms owners, in particular handgun owners. I think that that's something we should do. We have one of the nicest ranges in all of the Midwest. We have some of the best firearms instructors in all of the state of Indiana and the Midwest, and I think we could utilize them to help put on citizens academies where they could come in and familiarize themselves with weapons that they can ultimately use to preserve their life, and that they need to know how to function them when they're in their home.
Now we finally have a question that only has a single part. So. Issue. The U.S. Constitution is a set of rules intended on telling government what its limits are. There have been lawmakers who insist on overstepping their authority and making laws that are in contrast to the founding document. Most constitutionalists believe that an unconstitutional law is not a law. If such a law were passed, would you be obliged to enforce it? I think we've already answered that, but if you want to respond to it.
Can you repeat it again? I'm sorry.
If such a law were passed, would you be obliged to enforce it?
I've answered it, yes. Again, when I took the job to be a policeman in the state of Indiana, I took an oath. So if law gets it put into place, I will enforce it, yes.
John, I'll read it again. The U.S. Constitution is a set of rules intended at telling government what its limits are. There have been lawmakers who insist on overstepping their authority and make laws that are in contrast to the founding document. Most constitutionalists believe that an unconstitutional law is not a law. If such a law were passed, would you be obliged to enforce it?
Well, it's difficult as a police officer to determine what's constitutional and what's not, what is not constitutional. And I'm not so sure that it's our job to interpret the law. However, whether it's constitutional or not, I think it's important that we have a good working relationship with our county attorney and our prosecuting attorney as well. And over the course of my career, we have had several laws that were kind of head scratchers where we weren't really quite sure, so we did defer to our prosecutor or our county attorney. Sometimes the Attorney General of the state of Indiana, and we've said, we're not quite sure how to interpret this. What's your take on it? So I think if there was ever a question as to the constitutionality, I think that we should fall back on the experts and ask them how they feel and get a ruling from them before we proceed. I would always put it into abeyance until we were 100% sure that we were on good, sound legal grounds.
Steve? Would you like me to repeat it?
No, I think I have it. Yes, we are bound as police officers, which I'm not right now, but will be if elected, to obey the law, to uphold the law and the Constitution. But yes, very definitely, the sheriff has a duty to, now maybe not for every little thing that has already been set and has already been well in practice and there's no complaints or questions about, but yes, if we get a no-knock warrant and it's for $50 worth of drugs, that this happened down in Georgia where a young boy, a flash grenade was thrown into his crib, and burned the side of his face, and has taken almost $1 million worth of treatment. Do we honor the Fourth Amendment in cases like that for $50 sale of drugs or something and go in with a full force? That's not the way that things should be done, and that's where we're headed. And this report I referred to earlier has a lot of incidents like that. So a sheriff has a duty to you to be sure that something is really constitutional. I don't care if the court says, hey, you can't stop us from coming in even if we're making a mistake. I mean, that That's just flying in the face of the Constitution. So sheriff's gonna have to make some decisions there, some executive decisions, some administrative decisions, but decisions that affect you and his officers. So I don't want any of the guys getting hurt either. I don't want you feeling defenseless, and I don't want them feeling like they can't enforce and do their job because of fear of retribution or whatever. And it's getting to the point now, across this nation, where the police officer is losing credibility in the face of the people. And that has got to stop. And I am still, even though it's been a number of years since I've been in the department, I still have a great love for law enforcement. And I don't like to see these things happening. And these things are happening because of some of it getting out of control. And there's only one way to prevent that, and that's to start reining in the things before they happen here. Yes, we can say it'll never happen here, but I'm sure that there's a lot of people across this country that have been saying that. And these reports are full of incidents like that, and I'm sure that people thought it would never happen there.
Alan, another John? You need another 60 seconds, Steve?
No.
Okay. All right, next question. This is for John, and another single point question, all right? Okay. Changing the tape.
Do we need to take a 5-minute break?
You just want to take a break, or do you, whatever you think?
Can I get another water?
Sure.